Well, last time we had a heck of an echo, so thank you. Morning, everybody. I see we have Paul and Dan here. Good morning. Let me just turn my volume down here. Getting an echo.
Good morning.
Morning, Paul and Dan.
Morning.
Give it a couple more minutes for people to pop on. I know I heard from Mike Tortora. He's not able to attend. He's got a medical issue, and hopefully we'll see a couple of the other members pop on. And if not, we'll give it a couple minutes and then we'll see who else shows up to add to the discussion.
All right.
I'm going to go on mute here until then. Okay, well, in the interest of in courtesy to everybody who is here on time, if anybody else pops in, we'll add them to discussion, and we will convene this meeting of the Mold Working Group Wednesday, November 15th. I want to apologize for missing past 2 weeks. I had a conflict last week, and I had a week before had some semi-emergency dental work to be done that morning. So had a crown that cracked, so that was kind of painful. So they fit me in, and so figured I didn't want to take the meeting, have the work done at 8 a.m. and then have my lip on the floor as we're trying to conduct this meeting. And so here we are, and I thank you all for being present. What I wanted to do today, and I was hoping to have the larger group, as I've had some time to reflect on this, I wanted to go back through the scope of our kind of the purview of what we're asked to do. Recap, because I did in that time period, I did have a meeting with the representatives from the Community Association Institute, the association that represents condo boards. And on that call, there were I'll get into that later. And then I wanted to address the property disclosure. What came out of that meeting was some talk about property disclosure reports. So just with the three of us here, I'll review that real quick. Just to let you know what our purview. So obviously it's to establish this working group to evaluate the connection between polybutylene pipes and indoor mold in residential and commercial buildings, included but not limited to: 1, whether the pipes are a contributing factor to mold growth. And I think that in all of our discussion here, I don't know if it can be an absolute, but it certainly is a good possibility. So I don't think you can say the pipes are a contributing factor to mold growth, but they have the great potential to be, especially if they're leaking and it's undisclosed or unknown. So there certainly, those do have an impact, potential for mold growth. The impact of mold on the health of residents and potential solutions, such as early intervention options to prevent mold growth in buildings containing such pipes and abatement of mold found in such buildings. I wish Chris Ident were here, or Mike Tortora. Those are the two indoor air quality experts part of this group, but the testimony or the discussions we've had is that certainly if the pipes are leaking, left untouched, unabated, you certainly have the potential for mold growth. And depending on the severity, that can affect people's health of residents. And then the potential solutions such as early intervention options to prevent mold growth in buildings containing such pipes. So I wanted, and I know that the gentleman from Carriage Park, we had a couple residents who were very concerned about that, and I want to make sure we're addressing all those concerns. But I just want to make sure that my point in reading that is just to make sure we're staying true to the scope of work. Any questions on that? I just gave a kind of a filibuster there, but Paul or Dan, I just wanted to kind of review and remind myself what we're being asked to do in part of our meetings.
I think that there should be a qualifier with that statement as well, similar to what you put on the other one. That the pipes in and of themselves aren't a contributing factor to mold. But the propensity for those particular types of pipes to leak, and then once they start leaking, is definitely a contributing factor to mold. And the underlying problem there is that leak, as with that pipe or other pipes left undetected for a long period of time, is going to definitely contribute to mold. And how do we prevent that? Would it be mitigation that involves replacing all of the piping in a building, and things of that nature, which obviously would be a monumental task in any of these existing buildings. But again, it's the propensity of the pipes to leak that causes the mold and the mold potential. So I guess a qualifier that might be my point. Dan?
Fair, completely fair statement. I took notes here because I changed offices. I left my notes from our last meeting at my home office, but at any rate, I think that's important, as you state, to have a qualifier in there, and I think that can be part of the as we make recommendations, because that's what this task force is. Yeah, that's what we're here to do, is make recommendations on how to improve this. And I think, to your point, it's not the sheer fact that those pipes are there. If they're not leaking, there's no issue, but they have a great propensity to leak. So I will, which then water untouched, unnoticed, could cause mold, has the possibility to cause mold. So duly noted. Dan, any questions or comments?
No, I think that based on the research that I did, I think it should be noted that this pipe was designed intentionally with a 30-year life expectancy. So frankly, it's not, the pipe is at this point anywhere is beyond its economic life. It was surprising to me that they intentionally designed a pipe for 30 years, but that's what they did. And I think that needs to be noted, because at this point, I think any management plan would have to begin addressing it, because if not, that's just like, leaving the time bomb there, knowing it's going to go off, because it's going to go off.
Dan, in your research, did you note whether or not that 30-year time frame, well, I've heard 20, I've heard 30, but did you know whether or not the intended use of this pipe was for mobile or manufactured homes, which themselves might have a 20 or 30-year life expectancy, as opposed to a permanent stick-built structure?
Actually, I didn't see any differentiation in what I was reading. Actually, the amount of reading I did would probably make you nauseous, but I actually like doing research. It's what I do. I'm pretty good at it. That's why I end up in the privileged positions I end up in, because I'll do my homework. But I did find it fascinating, that 20 to 30-year life expectancy.
Yeah.
Because I've never heard that about copper. I mean, we put that in, and we find houses built in the 30s where the original copper is still perfectly fine. It is pretty unusual. I know at the time that this was done, copper was at a expensive point in its history. So part of it was price. Some part of it, I'm sure, was just availability of material that caused this. But you look, it's an interesting subject. But again, I think that 30-year life has to be stressed, because, if my car is designed to go 125 and 1,000 miles, and I'm complaining because I didn't get 150,000 out of it, I probably don't have a lot to complain about. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at here, because in all honesty, part of I can tell you, we saw a lot of this stuff years ago in real estate transactions, and we're not seeing it much anymore because most of the places that had it have already addressed it. Unfortunately, it appears we clearly have some complexes and various people that, for whatever reason, have not been able to or haven't responded to the issue, but it makes it interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I made notes of that. I do recall you mentioned the lifespan in our last meeting, and I documented it then. Again, I didn't have my notes with me today, but so I think both of those points are great, and we will add those to our findings and our recommendations. If it's okay with you, I just wanted to recap briefly the meeting I had last week with the Community Association Institute there. One of their executive directors, we had a representative from the insurance, basically an insurance agent who handles a lot of condos. We had an attorney who works a lot with condo issues. And also on that call, I guess it was two attorneys and then an insurance person, as well as me, wearing both hats of kind of the mold remediator and in this role. So we talked about the issue. They were all aware of the issue, having seen it in limited scope. And there was also a large scale property manager on the call, who one of the largest property managers in the state, who manages dozens, if not more than 100 different associations. So they have a pretty good scope. And to your point, Dan, their exposure had been limited in terms of seeing those around in recent years, but there have been some issues with the pipes noted. And we talked about the different remedies. Would there to put it in the condo documents when somebody buys a condo, it's there front and center for them. And the argument to that was, well, just because they're there, if there hasn't been an issue, you could cause alarm without, undue alarm to somebody trying to sell their unit. We talked about the property disclosure form and all the kind of the making buyers aware. It was pointed out that a first-time buyer, somebody looking to get into a condo, somebody out of college, would not, and most of the general public would have no idea what a polybutylene pipe is and would not know to ask. Kind of the crumbling foundations were a big deal, and they had a lot of press. So maybe somebody who was unsuspecting might know enough to ask, but that became part of the property disclosure report. So after about an hour meeting, the suggestion was made to add to that property disclosure report the fact to at least start the conversation to ask the seller if they are aware, in a similar fashion that we addressed, lead, paint, asbestos, and also the concrete, crumbling foundations. Could we do something similar on that report? Recommend adding a section or a box to bring awareness to the polybutylene pipes. Again, they're not everywhere. They're in a certain, this property fell in between those timeframes of, what was it, 78 and 91. So I'd like to have your feedback on that. If you think that would be a reasonable, one of the recommendations that we make would be to add that to the property disclosure report, and I'll leave it to the two of you. And I see Tyron has joined us.
And I do have an opinion on this one. I know you're shocked. You're a good-natured guy. I appreciate that. Thank you. If you notice, there's already some questions on plumbing there. And one of them, are you aware of any problems with the plumbing? And if so, identify. The concern that I have about adding another line on this is asking about the poly pipe. Most people don't know the difference between this pipe, the red pipe, the blue pipe, the white pipe. All they know is it's not copper. So you're going to be requesting them to, they're going to guess. They won't know. which is an uncomfortable position. It's not a black and white situation. I think the question's really kind of covered already. If you're aware of a problem with the plumbing, you got to disclose it. But I think if you break out specifically this issue, and I know you said you mentioned the concrete issue. I mean, if you were to look at the dollars that the concrete issue have involved so far, we're talking about a very different issue. We had situations, and one of the reasons that this ended up in here was we had situations in which people were unintentionally covering up or repairing their foundations, thought it was perfectly fine without having any idea that what they had done is just covered the issue that was bigger than they thought it was. I filled in the cracks in my foundation. It's not leaking. I have no problem with my foundation. Okay, that wasn't a very good answer, because it turned out you filled in and you actually hid the problem by accident. So we had to get more detailed in there. But in this case, I think the questions to cover are already there. And I think so few people will know exactly what that plumbing is to add the next question regarding the poly pipe. You're either going to get the unknown, which is what a lot of people do when they fill these out because they don't know. I don't think you're going to get yourself any further. In reality, and we're going to go back to that condo project, unless you sat at an association meeting or talked to your neighbor, you have no idea that plumbing's there. All you know is you turn on the water and it comes out.
Yeah. So what is if it's not the check the box, I think what trying to achieve is to have the buyer know to ask the question, and then maybe to ask that of their home inspector.
Well, the home inspector will already generally identify that if he sees it,
Okay.
but he's also not going to guess about what he sees in the wall.
Right. Right. Yep.
But I guess the question I have is, when the condo docs are released, one of the things that's supposed to be listed is all potential liability for the association, because in most of these units, the unit owner doesn't necessarily own the plumbing. They own from the sheetrock in. Frequently, it's the association's liability. I guess I'm going to straightforward ask, why are the associations not having to disclose this in their documentation along with any of the other issues they're disclosing? It doesn't make sense to me. They should be the ones with the actual knowledge of if that product is there or not.
Yeah, because it is some of the plumbing could be to the, specific to the unit, if it's in an interior wall, right? But in those common walls, if I'm understanding my knowledge of condos, I guess it depends on it actually depends on how the condo docs are written, right?
Absolutely does, yes. And some are different.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So.
And the other part is too, frequently what they did is when they would stub out to like your toilet, they would convert it, do the transition to a copper fitting so that they could use a traditional valve that went to the toilet or the sink. All the rest of the stuff is in the wall. There's really to expect the homeowner to know, the only way they would know is to go to a condo association meeting and have it discussed. That's why I keep wondering, why is this not on the association? If they're aware they got an issue, and clearly the one of the complexes that is well represented in this group, they're aware. I don't understand why the association isn't taking responsibility for disclosing it in their resale certificate right up front.
We don't know that they aren't now, do we? I mean, perhaps they.
I don't know. I think Harry was one of the people in that association.
So you're absolutely right, Dan. As a homeowner, you're not going to know. I purchased my condo in 2007. I didn't find out that I even had this piping until 2020, right? So most homeowners, even if for the home inspection, this inside the walls, and we own from the sheetrock out, right? So there's nothing coming out of the walls that is polybutyl to say to a home inspector or to even a homeowner that don't attend association meetings, even though in their mind, I turn on my water, I flush my toilet, turn on my dishwasher, and it works. And it's almost impossible to know unless the association disclose it in the docs, and the accountability should also be put on them too to notify that. But again, it's not in our documentation. We don't have that listed anywhere. And even if you're not in a condo, even I say someone who owns homes may not even know, unless you are going in your basement and you see exposure of pipes, but you're not going to know what's inside your walls.
Right.
So are we looking to simply ask if the condo association is aware of the fact that they have polybutylene pipe, or are we asking if if any homeowner knows, or, I guess my question is, what is it we're looking to ask? For instance, Dan, you referred to the association needs to take liability and make sure that they report this. And we don't know that in the case of where Harry's located, we don't know that they haven't started doing that now, because it has become a well-known issue. As a member of a board and another association, we in our condo disclosure documents, we are, as a board, we are required to make sure that anything that's a known problem is disclosed in those documents. But for instance, in this case here, if there's been some leaks and the leaks have been addressed, what are you disclosing? Simply the fact that you have the pipe, or the fact that you've had leaks, but the leaks have been remedied? What is it we're asking them to do, with this question, with this document? I guess is where I'm going with that.
Well, I'm thinking that it's interesting that you bring it up that way, because if you take that approach to put it on the residential property condition disclosure, they know less than that association does. And you're sitting there saying, so what is the association supposed to disclose? Well, that same question can be turned around and say, so what is the homeowner supposed to disclose? So you're really, except for the fact the association is more educated on the subject than the average homeowner. I can't say if it's a potential liability, if there's a footnote that goes in there. I can't say that for sure. I would like to hear from association management companies, which I know Steve said he met with. But I don't think the property condition report is going to get us what we're trying to do here. I listened to Harry at one point, and he said that he had no idea about any of this. And what he didn't say was, would it affect his decision to purchase had he known? And that would have been, I guess I'm asking you a question, Harry. Do you mind?
Yeah. So, I think for me, definitely having an understanding of the pipes, and I would have asked a lot more questions and getting understanding of, once I understood probably the liability from the insurance and where that's going, and probably going to end up bankrupting our condo association, I probably would have tried to look for probably another place that didn't have these pipes. And I think honestly, at this point, right, like I don't think there's any, new condos that are being constructed with these pipes. Obviously they're not being manufactured anymore. And so as far as, educating, current homeowners, I think that we may run into some issues with that without an actual solution, right? They're going to be like, okay, thanks for letting me know. Now what? And so I don't know if that's the route, but I think that there should be some understanding of the condo associations, the level of risk that, their potential members are going to be taking on. I know currently, we don't really probably have it in any documentation, but I know that in our board meeting minutes, it's been a topic of discussion. It's been an agenda item. And so, it is within those documents, which are available to condo owners. And Tyron, I don't know if you've already mentioned that the insurance companies are now essentially recommending that we really replace these pipes, or they won't be covering us moving forward. So
Harry, that sounds like an issue that should certainly be in the condo docs.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. So in your disclosure documents for the association that you're in, is the presence of those pipes and the problem with them, has that been disclosed is that disclosed to a new buyer today?
To a new buyer today?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, no.
Wow.
Yeah, we've been again, when we first started this, it was Tyron, myself, a few other condo owners who were the ones going around door to door kind of alerting people of this issue.
Wow. That's interesting. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. A potential issue that could bankrupt the association and they're not disclosing it by your wording. That's a disturbing message.
Yeah, I think it's a bit disturbing, given that they probably knew about it before they actually started sending documentation to the owners regarding the increase in the insurance premium. So, so I think that's kind of the issue. I don't know if it's something that's like an issue moving forward. I think we can get them to, notify new homeowners of that issue, but it's more so, how are we looking at the current situation of, is it some sort of neglect? I don't know personally.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd be
So
interested to
it's
go
just-
back to Steve and ask him, when you met with the group that was actually representing associations, how did they respond to this? Because again, listening to what Harry and Tyron are saying, this is kind of an eye opener that I didn't expect and an angle that I didn't expect.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't think I knew or didn't know that this particular association has not put it into their disclosures. There's a large awareness of the issue and it's not in the condo docs or the disclosures. I was not aware of that when we had that discussion with the group last week. Now I'm wondering if maybe it'd be good to ask several of those members to come and join this group for a meeting to ask questions, given the Harry and Tyron situation. We didn't get into that, to your point, Dan, or to your question. That specific situation didn't come up.
Yeah, and I think if I would love for this group to kind of figure out what are the options to remedy it, right? Because we have this problem, right? And we know that there's a shelf life on these pipes throughout the state, and they're leaking left and right in multiple units, multiple houses, everywhere, in the inland, east, the border. What can we do as a group, as a recommendation to say, how can we help all of these homeowners remedy this situation?
Yeah, and to Tyron's point, that's our insurance company is actually pressuring our condo association to do the same thing now that they're fully aware of these pipes and the liability. They are on this consistently, and I know that they update the board on their recommendations as far as guidance to minimize our increase that is definitely going to be happening. Again, ideally it's not 100% increase like we just recently experienced, but again, they are looking for something to be done about these pipes, and for us to send them documentation as a condo association what we're doing about it, because they've recognized it's a significant liability that they quite frankly don't want to cover anymore.
By do something, are they looking for you to come up with like a 5-year remediation plan?
On
our looking for it all to be done tomorrow afternoon?
On our last board call, I mean, they're already talking about what do quotes look like for pipe replacement. Right. Like they're asking for due diligence on the condo association side in coming back with what those possible solutions would be. I know that we've discussed the water bug possibility that I think they're definitely going to require us to have them installed all around. I know that we have some plumbers looking at the flow coming into the condo. So there's a few different things that we're initiating on our end to, again, show the insurance companies that are the insurance company, excuse me. It's not like there's a bunch that want to cover us. Show Philadelphia that, we're trying to do something about these pipes. And I recognize that if we really don't come up with kind of anything feasible, then, you know, their next action would be either significant premium increases or completely dropping us from the policy. And Tyron, you can, you know, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, but I believe that's the most recent discussion that our insurance broker had with our association.
Is pressure one of the things related in your complex that you know of, whether or not your street pressure coming into the building is playing a factor? You know, there are some components of plumbing systems that have a recommended maximum street pressure, operating pressure. And sometimes in some cities and some communities, those pressures in various regions, for one reason or another, whether it's having to do with elevation or proximity to the pumps or the storage tanks, sometimes the pressures exceed those operating pressures. Do you know if that's an issue in your particular
No,
complex?
majority of it is it's just overall just, you know, 30, 35 years of having this pipe is just leaking or they're failing one by one. So it's not less necessarily the pressure coming from the street into our units. It's just disintegrating little by little the pipes.
Okay.
I understand his question regarding the pressure, because in my building and in everywhere in the center of Ellington, they actually had to put reducer valves in because the pressure was actually above what the plumbing was actually designed for. The other part that they tell us all the time is the pressure from the street is not consistent. And, you know, copper handles it. The PEX plumbing we use today can expand and contract a little so it can handle the fluctuations in pressure. But this material is not handling the fluctuations from pressure. And so you got to think that that's got to be part of the issue. I actually would agree with him, because if the plumbing can't expand and contract a little, eventually what's going to give is that fitting.
I'm wondering if one of the mitigation things might be a pressure reducer or a pressure regulator.
Right.
You know?
Right.
All right.
And for Harry and Tyron and Chris, who joined us, you know, one of the first things we did was just kind of jump in and review the scope of the legislation and what this group was tasked to do. And a lot of it was a focus on, and again, actually, since Chris is here, I'm going to just go back and because it dealt with your area of expertise, Chris. So this working group to establish the connection between these pipes and indoor mold in residential and commercial buildings, included but not limited to whether such pipes are a contributing factor to mold growth. So to point out, you know, what we talked about was these pipes have a great propensity to leak versus other types of plumbing. So yes, they could be. I don't think you could say they are contributing, or I guess maybe you could say they are, but they certainly could be because of their propensity to leak. Then, Chris, this is where I think you come in, perhaps, you know, the impact of mold on the health of residents and potential solutions. So, I mean, certainly there could be an impact. Everybody, you know, has a different experience with, you know, exposure to mold. And the potential solutions such as early intervention options to prevent the mold growth in buildings containing such pipes and abatement of mold found in such buildings. So, you know, when we passed this legislation, you know, with my understanding that, you know, we were tasked with kind of creating an awareness campaign. You know, when you talk about early intervention, making sure that people are aware and what their you know, certain solutions, maybe what the resources available to them are. I didn't think that we were going to be getting involved in, you know, mandating remediation or abatement, but more tools and resources for people to, and certainly knowledge and awareness, so that the next person coming down the pipe, to Harry's point, doesn't end up in the same situation. And I just want to throw that out there. I'd like to see what this, you know, to make sure that, you know, are we all on the same page with that, or am I kind of in my own down my own path, and there's more of an expectation, having read what I read?
I think you know, we've summarized this a number of times. I think it's straightforward. You know, in the work that I do, you know, a lot of data and research and developing outcomes. And you know, sometimes when you want to understand the strategies, you have to understand the end. right? And so I think that in these conversations, we're talking about things that are complementary. And so as we think about how to educate folks and how to create awareness, we also have to have an understanding of what the effect of that will be. And so, people will be looking for some sort of remediation. And so I think it's important to talk about what those options are so that we can understand the level of education, because I will tell you right now that there are condo owners, and I'm sure across others in Connecticut, that if there's no SEFR remediation, they don't want this issue to be widely known because it's impacting their number one investment. And there's a number of folks who are beyond retirement age who would, quite frankly, be very upset if it was just told everyone, hey, this condo has polybutylene piping, watch out. Mic drop. There would be a big issue. So again, I understand what we're tasked with, but I think in understanding what the possible solutions are, it can help us, more, I think, intentionally, give out what those education pieces should be and what parties should be responsible for that.
And I want to just echo what Harry said. I think is education is key, but it's also what are the options to current homeowners and future homeowners on what resources they have available to them to remediate these pipes out of the walls. And also address the potential mold issue that some of us are having. Because right when you think about is a small little needle leak, right, in a number of our units where it's leaking over time, which is causing mold because you don't see is leaking behind the walls because you don't know what's behind your wall. This could be leaking behind your refrigerator, it could be leaking in your bathroom, it could be leaking behind your dishwasher, and you have no exposure until over time you see mold growing on your walls, and at that point it's too late.
I think it's worth mentioning because somebody used the conversation, they brought up the concrete issue. One of the people did. And I think you need to know the level of resistance that came from our legislatures on this issue. And mind you, this issue, so far, there's probably almost $350 million worth of money committed to this, and they're not done. I mean, this didn't help with commercial. This doesn't finish it. I mean, it's that big of an issue. I mean, to sit there and say that it was devastating, there were towns that were virtually watching 7 and 8% of their tax revenue disappear because of reevaluation because of the failing foundation. I mean, the economic impact on these towns and on these communities was staggering. I mean, if you took a town and cut its budget by 8% and said, here's all you got, they'd be closing schools. I mean, there would be nothing left. I mean, it would be beyond devastating. And this project literally took years and years of a lot of people doing a lot of work, testifying with their tears and their wallets to get any assistance from the state. And if you were to ask my opinion, which I'm going to share with you anyway, because this is a nice group of people. I think when I listened, because I sat there and listened to a gazillion hours of testimony because I was involved with it, I would be surprised if you found general support for economically the legislator passing a bill saying, here's some money. Because if they open up this door on this type of an issue, it's the floodgate. It'll never end. They potentially will put themselves in a way that I don't believe the legislators want to go. So I think we would have a hard time making the same argument that happened with the concrete by any standard. This would be tough. Harry said something that I thought was interesting about how if there's no solution, he would rather not see it out there. But to me, that's as a realtor, I represent buyers and I want buyers making educated decisions. Harry, I would feel bad selling you a unit and then looking at you saying, well, we kind of knew about this, but, we decided it was none of your business. I actually haven't met the guy and I like Harry. I wouldn't do that to him. So I, as much as I understand what you're saying there, and you're right, some people will feel a little shocked, but the reality is, I think there has to be, the associations need to start making a plan. And even if it's a 5-year plan, an 8-year plan, whatever the plan is, most insurance companies, I would think, would be happy seeing some sort of progress other than just praying that it doesn't burst tomorrow. Some sort of
Yeah.
plan. And the odd part is, I can tell you, I mean, I own a multifamily. And one of the things that came up in that multifamily was Federal Pacific stab lock breakers, which, if you want to do a little research on those things, they're referred to as a latent fire hazard. The bottom line is those breakers put Federal Pacific out of business because they fail. My insurance company basically told me, we want to know what your plan is. Well, obviously, I didn't have a boatload of money sitting here to begin replacing all the panels. I told them I would do it over 3 years. I thought I could get it done. And all I've been doing is sending them an invoice and proving them that I've been on plan and I haven't had an issue.
Yeah, and Dan, thank you. No, and we're on the same page. I'm only speaking. That was really devil's advocate, because again, we went door to door, and we were trying to get everyone kind of on the same page. There are some folks who are on the, hey, if there's no solution, I don't want anything. I'm on your end, where we have to let people know about this issue. And I understand, the appetite for something like this by the legislator, maybe, pretty minimal. But again, I think, especially down by the coast, it's looking like they're on the brink of a possible public health issue, right? And so I think there is utility in bringing together, all these experts and really talking through, I think, an issue that may not be as expansive or as tear-jerking as the crumbling foundations, but again, it's something that has a number of implications and impacts on residents. So, even if part of what we do is kind of craft what kind of that plan could look like for condo associations, because I know that, at least what I've seen, they all have kind of different levels of kind of business acumen, as far as, strategizing and things like that. So that could definitely be one thing that we do is kind of put together what kind of a rough plan for remediation could look like, as well as a communication plan for the condo associations and their members.
I would also think it'd be interesting to sit down and talk to the insurance companies to find out, because, we could create all kinds of great ideas. And if the insurance company looks at you and says, I don't like that idea, go find somebody else, that's a disaster. I think we need to have some sort of dialogue between, the associations, in plural, and the insurance industry as to what is the insurance industry realistically looking at for a practical plan. And notice I said practical, because it can't be to bust the association. But we got to find out what it would take to make that work. And by the way, for what it's worth, this is worth mentioning. I'm going to go back to the concrete. To eliminate a misunderstanding that has happened in other places, and I don't know if it's happened here, just because you apply with the indemnity company doesn't mean it's not going to cost you a lot of money. The indemnity company has caps on how much they can pay, and the indemnity company has caps on things they don't cover. And when I say they don't cover, when they cut back your sidewalk, that's not covered. When they take off your deck or patio, that's not covered. When they cut back your driveway 6 feet to get to the footing of the garage, that's not covered. If you had a finished basement, that's gone. That's not covered. They don't even cover putting in the basement stairs. The only thing that they can cover is the concrete. So, I mean, we have homeowners that are still having to pay $30,000, or I've got one right now in which it's going to be the final estimates to replace everything, including the finished basement, are $380,000. Bottom line is, it's still going to cost that homeowner $200,000 to get a new foundation and do everything back the way they were. So it's it's not like everybody just came up with this clean cut arrow to make everybody whole. Uh, you know, I think that's worth understanding a little bit about that process. Because again, I know there's, you know, a perception by some, well, geez, the state bailed out these people. Well, it's not, it's a big piece of help. It's the difference between make or break for a lot of these people, for most of them. But it's not the silver arrow that makes everybody whole tomorrow.
Dan, I think that was me who mentioned the foundations, and it was, I was not, if it came across.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right. I was
I
not
lose track.
That's okay. I was not proposing that that we maybe look at the same model where there's a financial component to this. I think my point was, when we're talking about the uniform
Mhm.
residential property report, that similar to the disclosure on that report regarding the foundations or lead paint, I envisioned, could we consider, hey, we know that these pipes were present between 78 and 91. I'm almost positive it's 91. You know, some sort of a line where, polybutylene piping is present in homes between 78 and 91, that they've been known to fail. They have a 20 to 30-year shelf life. Are you aware of the presence of these? And I know you said that maybe homeowners, that may be oversimplifying it, but I wanted to take the same tact, maybe to add this to that report, so that at least the buyer coming in knows even the word polybutylene, and maybe to ask, well, geez, this house I'm buying is 1982. Could it have these pipes, and maybe dig a little bit deeper?
Well,
That was
the interesting part is now, like, I'm going to give you a piece of data that's going to mess up your thinking just a little. So my house was built in 1960, and I had some plumbing replaced, and guess what they used? So one of the things that we usually try to lose quickly is, don't worry, you're safe because your house was built in this year.
correct.
In real estate, improvements from the beginning to the end may not. As a matter of fact, one of the houses that I did was a restored house built in 1760 in Tolland that had this plumbing.
And that's a good point. So, so again, you may not be able to catch every example, but the fact that these pipes are, are still in homes, they were available between this time period. I'm not sure how you catch all, because if there was a significant renovation, or maybe the house was built in 82 and they used it, and since then they've done a renovation and swapped it out with PEX, or, when they redid the bathroom, the pipes were there originally, and now they're, copper or PEX. So there's that variable as well. And I'm sure we may not catch everything, but I think the point I'm trying to make is, how do we, show somebody like Harry or Tyron or anybody coming into to purchase their house, that that this thing exists, and you should ask about it. Maybe it just
An educational campaign.
you're not going to catch everything, but how do we bring awareness to the fact that this stuff exists and it's faulty, and so somebody potentially, we save somebody from at least entering into something unbeknown.
And I think that's what a big part of the charge is that you read this morning, Steve, was to make sure that we find a way to make people aware of this potential problem. The disclosure statement's one way to do it. Is it the best way? I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I think I agree with some points that Dan made. But I think that we need to look at a couple of things. And one is the educational component. How do we make homeowners, home buyers, condo owner buyers, and so forth, how do we make them aware of the potential of this, and the need to ask, and the need to be aware of it? How do we make sure that it's being disclosed where there is a known problem? And for the purposes of what to do about mitigation and how to address these problems, I think if we're going to involve the insurance companies, which might be a good idea, we want to involve the insurance companies from the standpoint of, these are the potential losses that you may incur. So how can we work together in concert with you and other agencies to come up with a plan that's going to minimize the losses and improve the potential that we prevent any major issues? Because insurance companies don't want loss. Let's face it, they're a for-profit business. If they didn't have to cover this, they would be all the better for it. So let's engage them in a way that, how can we come up with a plan that minimizes your losses? And because I know, for instance, in some fire situations and so forth, they have developed programs where they work with communities in fire prevention and how to prevent home fires, how to prevent, installing smoke detectors and getting all of that stuff done. Maybe we can engage them in an educational campaign that helps us put the word out about polybutylene piping and its potential hazards. And then the other component that I'm looking at is, so we have polybutylene piping. How do we know that we do or do not have an issue happening in the walls that we can't see? And there are ways to measure moisture content, in the walls. Perhaps that's a service that we put together, in a component that we again make available to people. For instance, in the condos that I'm working in my buildings that I'm working in, when there's a leak in a building from another unit, let's say up above, and we're trying to see how far the damage has gone, we don't rip open the walls. We use a meter. We use a tool to tell us, what's the moisture content in the wall, and that helps us gauge, what are we going to rip open and how are we going to ventilate this space, and so forth. So educating the masses that these resources are available might help us also minimize the cost of mitigation. Where we don't have a problem, look over time at getting the pipes replaced. Where we do identify that there's problems, come up with a way to speed up that so that we don't end up with the mold generation that we know is going to happen from these very long-standing, slow pinhole leaks. So there are ways to identify where you have that. There are ways to identify that you don't have a problem right now, and that can set us on a path of two different ways to address the problem. We've identified that we have a mold problem in the wall or a high potential because of the moisture that we're reading, or we don't. And that can be two different paths for, what an association or homeowner can take as far as, okay, I've identified I have polybutylene pipe, and now do I have a leak in the wall? We can check that without even opening up the walls, to a large degree. It's not foolproof, but to a large degree. So those are maybe some of the things that we might want to, as a panel, investigate and be able to put out there as, here's how we think we can address the concern. Here's how we think we can address the potential for the leaks. Here's how we think we can come up with a plan to help resolve the issues. And here's some agencies or whatever that we can engage that'll help us put that educational campaign out there and the information that people need to know that, hey, I might have a problem here. Now, how do I determine if I do or I don't, and how much time I have to fix it? Just some thoughts as we listen to everything that's going on here.
Well, I actually like your idea on engaging the insurance companies, because we know what they expect. They've got resources and ideas that may have not been transmitted yet. I think including them in this dialogue has to have value. Because let's face it, if it wasn't for the insurance issue, Harry might not even be here right now because it would be already an addressed issue of concern, right?
Yeah, and to both Dan and Paul's point, this is where the insurance companies are currently going right now, is what is your plan? So I think to Steve's point, as far as, if I were to kind of summarize what we're doing, right, we have to establish all of the different stakeholders, right, have some sort of communication plan for each of them, because they're going to be different, right? A homeowner versus the association, versus a seller, right? Like they're going to be our buyer versus seller. They're going to be slightly different communications. So kind of breaking those out and then having kind of this action plan, right? That different associations or entities can utilize as kind of a plan to rectify some of these issues that are being faced. And then I definitely know for the young woman from Groton area, they're really struggling with the mold down there. And so I think having some more public health resources around mold remediation is going to be important for that kind of action plan piece, because we want to make sure that they're really aware of what to do, right, when you discover that your unit is full of mold, because I think that they're having a more uh rapidly advancing mold issue than maybe our slow leak, slow mold over time issue. There seems to be right in their face right now, and that's obviously a public health concern.
And in that situation, is that directly attributable to the presence of leaking polybutylene pipe, or is there another issue going on?
I believe that they are the ones with the copper piping that is leaking.
Chris, I think you had a feedback on this, right? You said
Yeah, a lot of the stuff in the Bradford Manor place is related to water intrusion. A lot of it's built on hills and ledges, so they're getting a lot of moisture into the basement areas. One of the problems is most of the tenants in those properties don't have dehumidifiers because you'd have to pay for the electricity for the dehumidifiers. You store anything subgrade, you're going to have higher humidity conditions. You're going to get mold on the bottom of boxes and items that are stored down there and clothing and things. So I don't think there's as much a water leak issue as it is water intrusion issues, drainage around the properties, then so they have the copper piping, which tends to be just, if they have leaks, they're definitely localized and they're not systematic. We know with the polybutylene, you're going to have, eventually they'll all fail probably, if you give it enough time, particularly with weather changes and things of that nature. But theirs is a little bit different situation. And that community there has gone in and cleaned up basements, but if you don't dehumidify the basement and keep it dehumidified, mold's just going to come back. And I think that's one of their biggest problems is dehumidification in the basement areas, the lower units are.
I find it interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry. I find it interesting something Harry said, because I was able to sum up a big section. The insurance company is looking at you guys, asking you what your plan is. At the same time, you're looking at them saying, what do you expect as a plan? It is kind of funny, because not funny, haha. I mean, there definitely feels like there's a communication here missing that needs to happen, because you don't want to make a mistake. There's definitely a communication weakness here that somehow, and maybe it is through some legislative encouragement, that the insurance companies sit down at the table and discuss what they know or feel on this subject. Feel is not the right word, but you know what I mean.
I just want to let you all know I have a hard stop at 11. We have a meeting down the hall that I need to be at. But to that point, Dan and Harry, if it's okay with you, I will summarize what we discussed today. I'd like not to meet next Wednesday, given it's the day before Thanksgiving. I think that's going to be, everybody's going to be cramming it in, but I will get to work on seeing if we can get a representative from an insurance company, perhaps somebody from the insurance commissioner's office to be part of this discussion when we talk about how can we involve the insurance in this discussion, if that's okay, and try to schedule that next meeting. I'd like to say is it would be November 29th, 10 a.m. Beverly will send out an invite, and I hope at that meeting to have, let's see if we can get somebody on the insurance side to join us. If
I like the idea of having it somebody from that office as opposed to a specific insurance agent or agency, because we're having a very open dialogue here. I don't want to create a more awkward situation for those association members that are in the middle of this.
So you prefer to have the insurance commissioner's office or somebody from an agency?
Somebody from the commissioner's office.
Okay.
Because if we were to deal with some encouraging to the insurance industry, it would come from that office.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think the insurance industry is aware, just like they are with the, we talked about the
right
concrete, the aluminum wiring, those panels you talked about. There's an awareness of this product too. It's, okay, how do you feel about it from the person who's insuring this, and how can we get some feedback from them, maybe what they're looking for, what their expectations are of Harry's association. Like you, Dan, you mentioned, does that have to be fixed next week, or we're getting dropped, or can we work on a 3 to 5 year plan? So,
well, this is worth mentioning because, as much as we've talked about the concrete way too much, there was a piece of legislation passed that was very effective and important, because one of the pieces of legislation stated that the insurance company could not drop a homeowner because they had a crumbling foundation. And that was a big deal, because insurance companies started dropping these people, and then they weren't getting new insurance. And what's one of the requirements of your mortgage?
Yep.
that you have property insurance. So we were potentially putting people into automatic default, in which our legislators did pass a bill saying, hey, you can't drop somebody just because they have this issue. And maybe that was effective, which, you know, I can't imagine it would be easy if you got dropped because you had a problem with poly pipe, that the next insurance company is going to be eager to sit down and talk to you,
Right.
if you get dropped. So I think that's something we need to be sensitive to and keep in the back of our minds. And so I'm looking at Steve, who's sitting there writing it down, which I appreciate.
All right, I'm gonna have to part here, but maybe one of the suggestions that was just made is maybe we get somebody from the Insurance Association in addition to the commission. They're representing multiple carriers and may be able
Right.
to feedback back to the carriers rather than putting
Right.
one carrier on the spot. Okay,
Good idea. All
thank you all. See you on the
Sounds good.
29th. If we
Thanks for your
can't-
time today, guys.
You got it.
Thank you.